Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, I have been wanting to make a video on Veil Wraith for some time now. This is a game from Tristan Hall, and Tristan Hall is, of course, the designer of games like Gloom of Kilforth and Shadows of Kilforth, amongst many others. And Veil Wraith is a solo only card game. And I know that Ricky Royal really likes this game a lot, Box of Delights, and it makes a lot of sense. The game is mechanically, I think, pretty interesting. However, I struggled with this game thematically, and the reason why I never made a video on it is simply that I didn't have enough to say about it. I didn't find the game interesting enough outside of the mechanisms. And I struggled with connecting the dots between what I was doing while I was playing the card game and what I was supposed to be doing as the character in the game. I've even read the opening little story multiple times. You're some kind of spirit of Veil Wraith in a world that is post-apocalyptic or something, and you're trying to get through a gate, and you need to play through something like 20 games in a row in order to win the campaign. There's a little bit of deck building. It all just felt like the thinnest little veil, the thinnest little layer of theme on top of what really is just a mechanically driven card game. I don't know. If you told me that this game was designed by somebody like Rainier Knizia, I might believe you. It feels like that. It feels like a Knizia game. Mechanically interesting, thematically kind of weak. And that brings me to Kreel Manor. Kreel Manor is a new game from Tristan Hall, and this was recently delivered from Kickstarter. I was a backer of Veil Wraith. I was also a backer of Kreel Manor. And Kreel Manor is a dungeon crawl card game made specifically for one player, but you can also play up to 3 players. But I would probably only focus with this as a single player game. And Kreel Manor takes all of the good stuff, all of that mechanical goodness, all of the nice, tight card play from Veil Wraith and adds some really good theme on top of it. And I think Kreel Manor is everything good about Veil Wraith with none of the bad things about Veil Wraith. And so this has completely replaced Veil Wraith for me. I will be selling this and keeping this because I think Kreel Manor is a pretty cool game. Okay, so let's take a look at Kreel Manor and see what we get in the box. We'll take a look at all the components, all of the various cards, and then we'll do a little setup and we'll kind of talk about how the game is played. So Kreel Manor is a dungeon crawl card game. You are taking one of 3 characters. We have 3 different classes, 3 different characters. We have our Night Raven, our Wolf of the North, and the War Mage. And each one of these has male and female sides. Now, each one of these characters has their own deck of skills, and some of those skills can be upgraded. Each of these characters has their own deck of assets, and those are weapons and armor and followers that they can earn during the game. And also, each one of these characters has its own deck of story cards, and the story cards will also correspond to the Book of Fables. And the Book of Fables includes all of the little narrative snippets of text, little flavor text and stories that you will be reading throughout a campaign. A campaign of Kreel Manor consists of 5 different games, starting with Adventure 1 through Adventure 5. Now, Adventure 1 is always the same. You always start at the entrance to Kreel Manor. Adventure 5 is always the same. You always end up in the same place. But Adventures 2, 3, and 4, those will have different adventures depending on the choices that you make with your story cards or through the Book of Fables. So there is some variety here, and I think the variety is pretty good. For such a medium-sized box and just a kind of a large deck of cards, quite a few cards, you do get a lot of replay value. So let's take a look at our cards here first. I do have some of the cards separated out for the first adventure because each adventure you will be creating subdecks of all of your various cards. You have threats. These are your kind of typical your low danger encounters. You have foes, which are kind of like your bosses, your encounters that have a higher level of difficulty. We have all of our heroes' skills, and these are separated out by your generic skills that all the heroes have access to, and then there are also those custom skills that each class has access to. I also have my class stories mixed in here. We have silver assets, which are different things that the characters can earn, brawn assets, actions, class assets, statuses, and wounds. And so, with the regular threats, there will be groups of threats, and the group will be listed on the bottom. So, each group of threats will consist of one plot card and a number of different encounter cards. I believe it's five. One, two, three, four, five. So, yes, so this vermin swarm group consists of the sealed barrels plot card, and then it also consists of two rat things and three refuse beasts. And so when you are playing through an adventure, you will have to defeat a number of the different plots, as well as taking care of any of the foes. The normal threats, those can be ignored or mitigated or defeated as you see fit, but you do need to encounter and defeat each one of the plots. For example, you might come across this sealed barrel plot if you are playing with the vermin swarms in your group of cards. And to defeat it, you have to have an attack value of 5 or a sneak value of 6. We'll talk about how you earn those totals in a bit. And if you do, then you get a choice. You can open them, you can smash them, or you can ignite them. And depending on what you choose, you will turn to that paragraph in the Book of Fables. So this card right here has 3 different outcomes. So I think that is pretty cool. So in the first adventure that we're playing, these are all of the threat cards. So we are using the Vermin Swarm, we are using the Manor Servants, we are using the Wild Claws, we are using the Deep Dwarves, and we are using the Manor Guard. So there are 5 different plots that we have to overcome, that we have to challenge, to face off against in order to beat that first adventure. If we turn to our adventure cards here, which is maybe where I should have started, where a smart person would have started, but you know me, I'm always doing things backwards here. But we have our adventure cards. So the adventure cards are locations, and those have a purple banner. And that purple banner tells you which groups of threats you are going to use. If you are playing with more than 3 heroes or 3 or more heroes, then you will also add an additional threat group. So the first adventure always starts in the Great Hall of Kreel. We are, as a character, we are approaching Kreel Manor to investigate, to go through the dungeon of Kreel Manor to defeat the evil that lies within. This adventure always starts in the same location, and that is the Regal Gateway. And so we have to overcome this location before we can move on to the next location. Then, as you can see, as you progress through the campaign, you will have choices of which adventures to do next. So, Adventure 2, we have A, B, and C. Adventure 3, A, B, and C. Adventure 4, A, B, and C. And then finally, Adventure 5. All campaigns end up in the Lord's Lair where you're trying to defeat the ultimate evil. There is also an endless variant where you can just set up a whole bunch of different random cards and play a game without having to worry about the campaign or the story. The other quest cards here are the different locations. And so we have our green locations and our red locations. These are a little easier. These are a little more difficult. But the locations will be things like Ambry's Blood Infirmary or the Sentinel Guard Room, the Fragrant Bathhouse Oasis, the Sojourner Guest Quarters, perhaps the Cave of Spectral Whispers. We also have places like the Celestial Dueling Grounds, the Chromatic Kalpa Gallery, the Imperial Master's Suite, and the Boreal Towers of Mensar. And each of your adventures will tell you how many locations there are. So remember, the adventure card is also a location. So this is a location that we have to defeat to win this adventure. We start here in the Regal Kreel at the gateway, and then we have to have two standard locations. And so you'll mix up your green locations, and then you will choose two of those at random, and those will be added into this stack here. So we will be progressing from the Regal Gateway to these two locations, and then finally ending up at the Great Hall of Kreel. The other two locations, let's see what we have here. We have the Torture Asylum and the Crafts Spire Workshop. Really interesting. I mixed those up, and those were the exact two that I have drawn for my last two games. Something about this game is forcing me to play those. So that's how you set up your adventure. And then again, you will look at your final location and you will create your threat deck using those, and you will create different subsets of those decks and then stack them together in a certain way. That first adventure also has the Goblin Chief as the main foe, so you will take that card out. And then it also tells you to take out your Wormkin Goblins, and these might get added to your threat area as you are playing. And then finally, we have a Lord's Vengeance card, and this kind of acts as a timer. If you ever run out of a certain deck of cards, if you ever run out of threat cards and you have to reshuffle, then you shuffle this guy back in, and it kind of lights a fire under your feet, and you want to win the game before this guy is drawn again, and that's one of the ways that you can lose. So we have a whole bunch of different other threats that come with the game. And again, those are all divided into one plot for each and 5 encounters for each. So for our Blood Tusk Orcs here, we have the Monstrous Orc as the plot. And then we have the Half Orc, the Blood Tusk, and the Ravager. Here we have for the Dark Hand, this is a faction. We have the Dark Hand Priestess is the plot. And then we have the Dark Hand Assassin and the Dark Hand Rogue. And so you get a pretty huge stack of different threats here. So I'll put those off to the side because we don't need those for this adventure. And then our foes. So these are all these stronger enemies, the little sub-bosses and the big bads that we have to defeat in each one of the quests. Again, the quest, the big bad, the foe for this first adventure is the Goblin Chief. But you might come across things like zombie warriors or Lord Kreel himself, the spectral dancer, a nature sprite, a spirit, a lizard man champion, an aberrant wretch, the armored jailer, the doom guardian, the dark hand scribe, or maybe the doom armorer. And like Gloom of Kilforth, like Shadow of Kilforth, the art in this game is very pretty. This goes for a very kind of pretty look. And it is kind of, the art is pretty fantastic if you're into that kind of style. So here we have all of our hero cards. And again, I have these separated a little differently than the game actually tells you to. So these are all of the cards here for our thief style character. These are the cards here for our warrior character. These are the cards for our mage character. And then these are the cards that all the characters have access to. And so you will start a game with 20 different skills, and you can build your hand of different skill cards as you are going. There's a little bit of deck construction. At the beginning of the game, you will be told to take your 10 basic skill cards. So we'll play as the Night Raven here. And so these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different basic skill cards. Things like Raven's Tenacity, the Silent Approach, Shadow Slip, Hidden Advance, Sly Cunning, and so on. And then we also have an ultimate. And your ultimate is an ultimate ability that you get to use when all of your other skills have been used. You will then have access to this final card in your skill deck. And then, of course, each of the characters also has their own story deck. And so the story in Adventure 1, you will start here. You will read this adventure. Then you will have a choice. Depending on what you choose between the next two cards, you will add that card into the threat deck of your next game. And when you encounter that card, you will again make another choice. And these cards will help you to navigate through the Book of Fables, as well as unlocking assets and character upgrades for your deck of cards. Because each of the characters also has an upgrade deck. And the upgrade deck, you will be able to substitute out the old card for the new card for the more powerful version. And then finally, in the instruction book, in the manual here, the rule book, there is a suggested number of 10 basic skills that you want to use. And so you can have things like hasty strike, soulful serenity, hurling projectile, gallows humor, and things like that. So this is the suggested starting deck for all the characters. And then you will take both of those decks and you will shuffle those together. And so that will be your character's starting deck of skills. Two decks of 10 cards each. So we can put that aside. Here are the other generic skills that you can mix in to create your deck at the beginning of the game or between games if you want to modify your deck a little bit. So here's our Thief story cards. We'll put those aside. And then again, here's all of our cards for our warrior with all of their skills and stories and all of their upgrades. And then we also have all of our story and skill upgrade cards for our magic user. So again, a lot of variety here. This game packs a lot of punch into a pretty small little box. And the box could actually be a lot smaller. That was another issue I had with Veilwraith, is the box was just way too big for the number of components, and that's kind of the same here. So we have our silver assets, and these are more powerful items that we can unlock throughout the game, such as armor and different types of followers, different types of weapons, one hand and two-handed weapons, different things that we can keep in our backpack. So all kinds of different equipment that we can unlock. Those are the silver unlocks. And then we also have the bronze assets. So these are a little less powerful, but there's more of them. We have axes and helmets and lanterns and fruit. So just your kind of typical fantasy items that you might get while you're on an adventure. We also have our class assets. So these are the special items that each of the classes has access to. Each class has access to their own unique deck of assets. So we have our starting longbow for our thief character. So they start with that. And then the thief character can also get poisonous darts, thieving tools, silent razors, and black leather. Our warrior character has access to the woven blade, Destiny's Edge, the Aegis shield, the woven mail, and the war Siege of Amber. Man, that's a pretty cool. That gives you a +1 to all of your stats. And then your wizard has the Tome of Magi, the Silver Dagger, the Ivan's Spellbook, the Mystic Robes, and the Aeonic Headpiece. So really cool. I love that each of the classes has their own unique custom deck of assets. We also have our statuses. So there are 3 different statuses, and these statuses can either be applied to your heroes or to threats and foes and things that you might have to fight against. So we have shield hero or shield threat. We have dazed action and dazed threat. And we have bold hero and bold threat. So these are just conditions that can be applied to any of the cards that you might come across in the game. We also have our wounds. So one of the ways that you lose this game is if you ever are suffering 5 wounds, you have lost the campaign and you have to start over. If you lose an adventure, you draw a wound at random and then you replay that adventure, and this wound makes things harder. So there's kind of a negative snowballing effect. As your character becomes more and more afflicted by wounds, it will be harder and harder to progress. But these wounds will be things like shattered ribs, chest trauma, fractured shoulder, a disc lesion, an ugly scar, a gouged eye, and splintered shin. So all kinds of really nasty things that you can become afflicted with. And then finally, we have our core actions. And this is really where the game has a lot of similarities between Veilwraith, between this and Veilwraith, because of the way that these actions work and the choices that you have while you are playing the game. And this game has a lot of choices. So if you like making choices in your games, I think you will like this game quite a bit. So we'll take our Night Raven character out here. Their lofty ambitions notwithstanding, one thing is for certain: they're not afraid of getting their hands dirty. Sending their finest assassin to the haunts of Creel Manor was something of an inevitability, particularly when the princely award for the safe return of the kidnapped Contessa was announced. So the Night Raven, their mission in Creel Manor is to rescue the kidnapped Contessa. So here we have places around our character card to keep our helmets, our body armor, things that we are wearing on our feet, our boots, different things that we have stored in our backpack, and our different weapons. And we will put that card right here. We will take our two-handed bow, our starless longbow, and we will place that off to the side here. We have our deck of skill cards. We can choose one of our starting hero class cards to take into our hand at the beginning of the game. So let's take our silent approach here, and then I will give these another shuffle. The characters will also start with a certain number of spirits. This is their life points, and you can never go above that, but you do have quite a few opportunities to heal. So we start with 20, so we'll take our dial here and set that to 20. So that's our starting life. And then we have our 3 actions. We have red, blue, and green actions, and those will correspond to your different characters. So each of the characters' different actions are slightly different, but we have red for fighting, and that goes in slot 1. We have our influence, blue for influence, goes into slot 2. And finally, our sneak goes into slot 3. The number associated with the slot also corresponds to how powerful that action is when we use it. So if we were to use a fight action in slot 1, that would be used for 1 power, 1 fight power. If I have a bow equipped or anything else equipped that adds to that value, then I get to use that as well. So right now, because of my bow at a +1 fight, my fight attack action is at a 2. When you use an ability, so let's say that I was using my influence ability at 2, so that's for 2 power. I could apply 2 damage, 2 influence damage to a threat. As soon as you use that ability, it drops to 1 and the other cards move up. So now my influence ability is at power 1, my fight is at power 2. If I were to use my sneak ability at a power 3, I could apply 3 damage to something. That would go down to 1, and then my fight would move up. So you're kind of constantly cycling these in and out of their various slots for different power values. You can also power up these abilities. Once per turn, you can simply tilt an ability, and you can add a d6 to that, starting with 1, and then that adds a bonus. Then you can tilt it again to power up again on your next turn, pushing that up to a 2. And then you can use those pips as extra power as you see fit. And so part of this game is learning when to use your powers, how to manipulate your powers in the columns and the strength slots that they are in at the most opportune time to do the most damage, and then also how those will be repositioned for future turns down the road. Because as you are facing off against your various threats, so these sealed barrels, you either need to have you have to do 6 sneak damage or 5 fight damage. And you can apply your tokens here. So for instance, if this was out in the threat area, my sealed barrels, and I had this configuration right here, I could use my threat and I could tap that for 1, 2, 3, applying 3 threat damage to this particular threat here. So I could take a damage marker of a 2 and a 1, and now I am halfway there to defeating those barrels, to defeating that plot, and being able to push further into Kreel Manor. It's a really interesting mechanism. There are a lot of choices to be made because not only do you have access to these 3 different actions each turn, and you can do 1 action per turn, and you can strengthen one of your actions per turn, but you also have your deck of cards, and you will be slowly building up a hand of up to 6 of these various actions. And these actions can be used to make each one of those actions stronger, or they can do additional things, will allow you to have additional choices to be made from one turn to the next. It's all very interesting, and you will feel very clever as you are playing this game, as you are putting together good combinations. You will start to learn various combinations and you will start to become better at this game. This game rewards careful play, it rewards attention, and you will learn to be a better player at this game. There isn't a lot of luck in this game. You're never rolling dice to attack. You always kind of know what you are going to do, and you need to be smart from one turn to the next. So we can take a look at our cards here. So here is, again, we're starting at the Regal Gateway. To progress to the next location, we have to apply 2 sneak damage. So we have to sneak through this card. And so as we build up our sneak power, we can add sneak damage here. And then we can, as soon as we have 2 at a certain time during our turn, then we will move on to the next location. The locations also have these active abilities here. And if I ever have an influence of 3 or more, I can take this special location action. That doesn't cost me any power. I don't have to use my influence ability. It's just a check to see if you have that much of one of those abilities, then you can do the special thing in that location. This is a really cool one, the Craft Spire Workshop. If I have a fight value of 3 or more, then I can craft a bronze asset, and I can do that once per game. With the Torture Asylum, if I have a fight of 3 or more, I can unlock the Iron Maiden and rescue a follower, and then I can find a follower in one of the asset decks, and I can add them to my character, and they can help me on the rest of the game. So each one of those locations has different things that you can do depending on your active abilities and the strength of each one of your abilities. Again, another choice, another thing that you might want to be working towards as you are leveling up, as you are powering up those abilities. Now, the next thing you'll do is you will take all of your various threat cards and you will organize those into a number of different subdecks and then stack those in a certain order. So there is quite a bit of setup. As you can see, the 2 pages of setup, and you do need to do this for each adventure. So it's not a simple game of just getting the cards out of the box. There is quite a bit of setup, and I think that's where some of the complication issues come into play. And so just remember that the threats have 2 different names. We have the threat group and the specific threat. And so if you can't find the Vermin Swarm card, you're looking through the Vermin Swarm because you're looking here at the name of the card. No, that is the name of the faction. That's the name of the group that they are part of. So if you can't find a card, just look at one of the other names on the card and you will you will be able to find it. I had that issue. I was looking for a threat when I should have been looking for a name, or vice versa. But yeah, just know that going in, that each card does have 2 different names. And so you will gather the green board, the plot cards for each, and then you will shuffle those. So I'm going to do the setup off camera so we don't have to go through that. Okay, so there is our threat deck. We have to work through this deck while we are also working through our various locations, trying to work our way into Kreel Manor. We will take our threat cards and we will place those, let's place those right here. And then we also have what is called the shadow area. And the shadow area is where enemies and threats are staged before they come out into the threat area and we have to engage with them. And so you'll use some of these tokens to keep track of your threat area. We have threat, or your shadow area. We have 3, 2, and 1. And these tokens will correspond to how easy it is for us to view the things in the shadows. So if something is in shadow slot 3, we can spend 3 points of sneak power to reveal that card. And one of the abilities that the Night Raven has is the ability to actually attack things that are in the shadows. Not all characters, not all abilities will allow you to attack things in the shadows. You can attack things before they engage with you. So that's a really powerful ability for the Night Raven. And so the first thing we do is we take one card and we add that to Shadow Area 3, just off the camera up there. But we'll keep this area here ready for our threat management area. And then basically the game begins. You will have your story card number 1 at the beginning of the game will be placed in your threat card, and that will show you on your character card. It'll tell you which story card to add to the first game, and then we can take this and read it. So we have the sneaky entrance. In the veiled shroud of night, you linger at the threshold of the ominous fortress draped in shadows that conceal every subtle movement. The mission, fraught with peril, commands you to infiltrate the manor's profound recesses, rescuing the captive Contessa ensnared against her will. A crucial decision about your fate plagues you. Noiselessly, you weave into the dark and deft fingers poised to navigate locked portals and concealed pitfalls. The corridor before you stretches into obscurity, harboring untold legends. 2 paths unfurl. We can proceed with restrained prowess, advancing deeper into the manor's core. If we choose that, we will take story card number 3. Or we can attune our senses to the night, listening for hints of unseen sentinels eavesdropping on the clandestine conversations of guards as you continue your exploration of the manor. Let's proceed with restrained powers and take story card number 3. So we will take that from our story deck and we will put that off to the side. And then this is mixed into our threat deck during the next adventure. So during the next adventure, the choices that we make in the previous adventure will have some bearing. That is really cool. I love that idea. Now we can go through the various steps of a turn. We have our delve step, which is our story. We just did that. Any delve abilities, if you had anything with the keyword delve, that would trigger now. If you have explored a location, if you have put 2 points of damage, of sneak damage on this card, this location is explored, and then we would move on to the next location. At that point, you could check for victory. Then you could do any local effects that take place during the delve phase would happen. And now we have our threat phase. The threat phase is where the threats come out. This is where the bad stuff comes out. So anything in slots 3 or 2 move down. If something was in slot 1, that would become an active threat. And now we add a card to shadow slot number 3. So as you can see, at the beginning of a game, you have a few turns to kind of build up your hand and to build up some of your power. Okay, so now it is our turn. We draw 1 skill. So I'll draw the top skill for my card. So now for my deck, so now we have Silent Approach and Sly Cunning. These are 2 cards that we have in our hand. Again, you can have up to 6 of these in your hand. And now we can play our skills. So we can play any of these skills. A lot of these skills can be played at any time. And then we can also activate our abilities. So we can tilt to make an ability stronger, or we can fully tap, rotate to use that ability's power. And each one of the characters has a special ability that has something special that they can do. So the Night Raven, of course, being a thief, her special power is her sneak ability, and that will give her the opportunity to add additional sneak damage to something. If we take a look at the warrior here, the warrior's special ability is, of course, fighting, and the warrior can add additional fight damage to a threat. So again, there is a lot of variety between the characters and a lot of variety in the game. This game, if you want something that has a lot of variety, a lot of different choices and different things to do on your turn, this is definitely a game that you will want to check out. So we need to explore the Regal Gateway for 2 damage, 2 sneak damage. Right now, my sneak is at 3. So that's a little overkill. You do want to start thinking about that kind of stuff, because using a 3 power sneak on a 2, that additional third point of sneak damage doesn't roll over to something else. It's just wasted. And so learning when, learning how, learning to balance this economy between the damage you are doing and the damage that something needs to be defeated is a very, very important thing that you will learn throughout this game. But let's fast forward a little bit and let's say we've played a few turns. Let's say maybe we've upgraded a couple of our abilities like that, and we have our threats. Our shadow track is full, and our first threat has come into the threat track. And so now we have to do what this says. So we have come across in the Regal gateway here. We're approaching the gateway, and we are confronted by a barbarian chieftain. She is from the War Claw threat group. She's a threat human. To defeat the barbarian chieftain, we need to either do 7 fight damage, 4 influence damage, or 6 sneak damage. So we can sneak by them, we can maybe bribe them, or we can seduce them possibly, or we can just defeat them in combat. This symbol here is a negative on our spirit. When it is their turn to attack, you will add up any of these values here and you will apply that much damage to your character. You also have an opportunity sometimes to block some of that damage depending on the assets that you might have or some of the skills that you might have. So if it was our turn now, it looks like maybe influence might be the easiest one to do. We only need a 4. Right now, my influence is at 2. Let's say I might have some more cards here. A fast block, so I can block 1 damage. 1 hero gains a spirit and 1 each of that power. Okay, so that's pretty interesting there. So I could play this, which would give me a +1 to all of my abilities. So that would be a 1. That would go up to a 2. That would go up to a 3. And then I could tap this to do, what was it? That was at a 1, to do 1, 2, 3, 3 influence damage to the chieftain. So put a 3 on the chieftain there. And then this drops to 1. I use this power, so that goes off. My fight goes up to 2 now. And then on the next turn, I would take 1 point of damage, but I could play my shield to block that point of damage. This gets regenerated at the beginning of the next turn, and then I could tap that again to do 1 point of influence damage, thus defeating the threat there. But you will have times where you will have multiple threats out here, and you will have to balance all of these. Right now, we have 2 plots that came out. We have the plot for the dwarven treasure chest. So if you either do 5 points of damage, so you bust that open, or you pick the lock, then you get to have a choice of what to do, and then you will get to read in your book of fables. So if we open this and we loot it, let's go into 008 here and see what happens. We open up the treasure chest, and in the heart of the dwarves' stolen trove, your inquisitive fingers unearth a concealed item glimmering with venerable resilience. The cool touch of the enchanted material against your skin reveals a coveted prize. Amongst the carefully guarded possessions, you emerge, a newfound guardian carrying a storied treasure of the mountain realm. Okay, that is a very verbose way to say draw 1 bronze asset, or gain 1 spirit, or heal 1 damage. But yeah, this game is really cool. I like it. I love all the different variety in the missions, in the locations, and what the locations can do. I like that the story has branching paths. So each time you play through one of the 5 adventures in a campaign, it's going to be different, especially when you start mixing in the various story choices and the various ways that each of the different 3 classes can upgrade their skills, the way that each of the 3 classes has access to different assets, to different armor, to different weapons, to different followers. And you have a lot of variety. And this game is really cool. It takes all of the clever card play, all of those really hard decisions that were in Veil Wraith, but it adds a very cool, approachable theme to the game that gives the player a connection between what they are doing mechanically with what their character is doing within the fiction of the world. And for me, since theme is king, that aspect is very important. And when I am unable to make that connection between what I'm doing thematically and what I'm doing mechanically, I tend to bounce off of a game. And that's why I bounced off of Veil Wraith and why I didn't have a lot to say about Velwraith. Conversely, that's why I didn't bounce off of Creel Manor and why I have a lot of positive things to say about this game. This game has completely replaced Velwraith. I will be selling Velwraith and I will be keeping Creel Manor. I think this is a very interesting game and a lot of fun, especially for a solo game. It's great. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this detailed look at Creel Manor. We will talk to you later. Bye bye.